Alright, this is video 1. I'm not going to be keeping track of the video numbers, but this is a video which is meant to serve as a replacement for my pre-class notes for Tory honors. Yes, and the only intended audience is Dr. Campbell, but you can watch this if you want to, and even if you're not Dr. Campbell. But if you are Dr. Campbell, I ask that you don't watch the only other video at this point that's on this channel, because it is embarrassing. So this video is the first video, and it is concerned with Richard II. Right there. And yeah, so I actually was reading this out loud with my entire group, which was a lot of fun. And I got to be Richard II, and I know this is supposed to be like it's definitely not going to be a summary kind of notes, and it's not going to be character analysis notes, but just an interesting thing was the character of Richard II seems to go up and down a lot, and I'd like to just spend more time thinking about him in general, which I will in session today. Yes, so my first core idea that I'd like to talk about is in reference to there's multiple times in the play where people suggest saying, oh well, you know, it is really miserable right now, but why don't you just pretend that it's not? I think Gaunt says that to his daughter, and Queen someone I forget the character names. Queen Isabel says it to her two servants that no, imagination is not legit for pretending to or to escape misery. Imagination isn't going to work because there's this knowledge that you're just pretending that it's not real. So Shakespeare is sort of exhorting his audience to stick with reality, which is weird because they themselves are in a play which is pretending, and so is he saying like, don't just use my plays for escapism? He may be, but that's just the first part of the core idea, that imagination is no cure for misery. And the other part, which is similar, is providence. Trust in providence isn't going to get you anything. Which seems kind of anti-Christian or anti-religious. I know Shakespeare was a Christian. I think he was sort of implicitly a Christian. I don't know how actually Christian he was. I actually don't know that. I should investigate that probably. But Richard kind of has a trust that he is anointed, and that because of that, there's no way ever that the man who becomes Henry IV will be able to dethrone him, because he has God on his side, and God is powerful. So it's not necessarily that Shakespeare is saying that God isn't all-powerful, but rather there's always kind of a weakest link between God, who's up here, and who's all-powerful, and you are totally not. And you are trusting in God to save you. But in between here, there is this, your knowledge that God is going to save you might be faulty, because you might not be anointed actually. You might have been lied to, and they said you were anointed, but you're not, or the records might be faulty. Any number of doubts could be present within that, and so even though God is totally trustworthy, your knowledge of him is not. And so we see Richard II trusting in this providence. I mean, he does end up being dethroned, so his knowledge of either his anointedness or what it means to be anointed, or something like somewhere in here as long as we assume that God actually is all-powerful, was faulty. Um, and because of this, trusting in providence is not a good idea. You have to look at the facts. And Richard actually does this, like he says, he gives these great speeches about how invincible he is because of God's providence. Um, and then he hears that all of his allies have deserted him, and he's just like, he falls into despair right then. And then they say, oh wait, you have a little bit more allies, and he's like, oh well, I guess God is on my side. And they're like, oh wait, no you don't. And he's like, oh well, never mind. I'm totally distraught, and all my armies are gone, and it sucks. Um, so he either sees God, um, God's providence is obviously not true, given that his armies are deserting him, or he doesn't actually trust God's providence. Um, he just uh, he just trusts his own armies and likes to throw around big words that don't have any meaning to him. But I think he actually does trust God to some extent. But he sees that his his thoughts that God would save him were wrong. He sees that he was wrong, not that God was wrong. I think because he never seems to get mad at God. He just kind of doubts his own power and stuff. So anyway, once again, the core idea is imagination is no cure for misery, and providence is no cure for misery, or the trust in providence is no cure for misery, which is why I think Shakespeare, one thing you can draw from Richard II is that um, trusting in providence and putting that as like a cure-all to miseries, like, oh, we got, like, to be honest, my mom does this very often, and that, which I don't think is necessarily wrong, but you could view it as being wrong, where we might take a wrong turn and it makes us 30 minutes late to something, she'll say, well, it's probably just one of those God things, and that we might have gotten into, or we would have gotten into a crash if we had gotten there on time. Um, and it's just kind of a groundless trust in providence, where you don't see any evidence for it. You just kind of really trust. Again, the problem isn't that you're trusting God too much, because God is in fact capable of doing those things and has done those kinds of things before. It's bad because your knowledge of it being a God thing isn't trustworthy. Your knowledge isn't trustworthy. God's trustworthy, but your knowledge is not trustworthy. So Shakespeare, I think, is saying uh, trusting in providence blindly is nothing more than grown-ups playing pretend. Like they're just pretending like this is real so that they don't have to feel so miserable. Shakespeare saying, no, that's ludicrous. That is not the way to be living your life. That's not the way to be, even if he is really a solid Christian person, and again, I'm not sure if he is, he's saying that's not how you're going to be a servant of Christ, by just saying like, oh, well, I have providence on my side, so it's no problem, right? Like, no, you're just blinding yourself because you don't like what you're looking at. Um, just like the servants are saying, let's sing a tale of joy to cure your misery. Talking about providence is not going to help. Um, but if there was some way in which you could be certain of God's providence over you, then it would count. The thing is, we're not certain about God's providence over us for anything that we don't need. And as it turns out, we don't need our kingdoms, we don't need our money, we don't need our health, we don't need anything. We need our faith in the Lord. And we know that we're going to a greater heaven in which all wrongs will be corrected, and restorative justice and things like that. And so we can trust in those things all the way, but we can't trust in things like the preservation of kingdoms. Um, yeah, so that's my core idea. I've hit 10 minutes, and I think I will be refining these videos more, probably putting more ideas into a smaller space, because I kind of rambled a little bit, and probably being more explicitly synthetical at the end, but this is just try number one. I think it's good because I wasn't thinking all those things at the beginning, and I think it kind of brought out a lot that I was trying to articulate. And I feel like, assuming I'm not just flat out wrong about this idea, I think it brought out some good things about Shakespeare. And this has been an enjoyable experience. Um, yeah, so thank you, Dr. Campbell, for letting me try this new form of note taking. And have a nice day.